If you love intense HFY stories where humanity turns fear into strength, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next battle. Your support helps this channel bring you more powerful sci-fi stories full of emotion, strategy, and unforgettable human moments. The Palace of Vale Taran did not look like a place where murder could happen quietly. Every wall was polished black stone veined with silver, every arch watched by golden security lenses, every corridor guarded by royal soldiers who moved like the throne itself had taught them discipline. Tonight, during the Unity Accord ceremony, the palace shone brighter than a starship chapel, full of nobles, council members, royal officers, and foreign envoys pretending trust could be built with silk banners and careful smiles. Human Diplomatic Protection Officer Adrian Vale stood near the lower ceremonial wing with two other Earth security staff, one hand resting near his comm bead, eyes moving across the crowd with professional boredom. "Remind me," he murmured into the human channel, "why royal ceremonies always look like someone dared architecture to become arrogant." Captain Myra Voss answered from the upper gallery, calm as ever. "Because arrogant architecture impresses people who think history is a weapon." Rowan Cade's voice followed from the security review station. "Also because no one ever asks humans to design comfortable chairs. A tragedy across species." Adrian almost smiled, but then a royal guard approached from the side corridor. The guard was young, silver-skinned and tense under his ceremonial helm. His nameplate read Tavern Saul. Adrian knew the face from the palace rotation brief, though not well enough to trust the sweat at his temple. Tavern stopped close and raised a private command seal. The seal glowed with the Queen's inner authority mark, the kind of clearance no foreign officer ignored. "Officer Vale," Tavern said, voice low, "Prince Kalen's return route has been compromised. Commander Siren requires you at the Eastern Service Passage." Quietly, Adrian's expression tightened. "Why me?" Tavern swallowed. "Human external detail was requested because palace channels may be watched." Adrian touched his comm bead. "Myra, I have a royal seal request from Guard Tavern Saul. Eastern Service Passage." "Confirming," Static answered first, then Rowan's voice broke through, distorted. "Signal interference in your wing. I'm seeing partial seal validity but not full routing. Give me 10 seconds. Tavern leaned closer, panic sharpening his words. "There may not be 10 seconds. The prince is exposed." Adrian looked toward the royal dais, where the young heir was being moved behind a curtain of guards. If the threat was real and he delayed, a child could die while he waited for perfect confirmation. "Myra, I'm moving. Track me if you can." Myra's reply came hard. "Adrian, keep your channel open. Always do." The Eastern Service Passage was colder than the ceremonial hall, with old stone walls and narrow maintenance lights that flickered in a rhythm Adrian did not like. Tavern walked ahead quickly, too quickly for a guard escorting an ally and not a prisoner. Adrian kept 2 meters behind him. "Where is Commander Siren?" he asked. Tavern did not turn. "Ahead, strange. He usually sends insults before invitations." Tavern reached a bronze security door and pressed his seal to the lock. It opened. Adrian stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind him before Tavern entered. For one silent second, Adrian stared at the sealed door. Then the alarms died. Not started. Died. The corridor's cameras blinked black one by one, and a body slid from the shadow near the wall. Adrian moved before thinking. A royal guard lay on the floor, armor split beneath the ribs, one hand shaking against the stone. A ceremonial blade rested nearby, placed too neatly, almost respectfully, which made Adrian's stomach turn. "Myra," he snapped, "medical emergency, Eastern Passage, guard down, door sealed behind me." His comm spat static. He dropped beside the injured guard and pressed both hands over the wound. Dark blue fluid spread across his sleeve. The guard's eyes found him for one terrified moment. "Seal," the guard whispered. "Not yours." Adrian leaned closer. "Whose?" The guard tried to speak again, but the corridor flashed with harsh light as security systems came back online. Doors opened at both ends. Royal guards rushed in with weapons raised, led by Commander Siren Val, his silver ceremonial armor suddenly looking less decorative and more like judgment. "Step away from him," Siren ordered. Adrian lifted his stained hand slowly. He was alive when I found him. Siren's eyes dropped to the blade, the marks, the sealed corridor, and Adrian kneeling beside one of his own fallen guards. You expect me to believe that? No, Adrian said quietly. I expect you to check the door log before whoever built this trap edits it again. Siren struck him across the face with the back of one armored hand, not hard enough to end him, but hard enough to send him against the wall. Bind him. Adrian did not resist as restraints snapped around his wrists. He only looked toward the dark camera above the corridor and said, Myra, if this channel is alive, Earth needs to know now. It was alive, barely. In the upper gallery, Myra Voss heard enough. Her face went still. Rowan stood beside the palace security console, already fighting through corrupted feeds. Adrian's wing just got isolated, then restored with a clean accusation package, he said. Badge log, weapon tag, injury alert all arriving at once. Too clean. Myra opened an encrypted human emergency channel. Earth diplomatic security, priority alert. Human officer Adrian Vale accused of royal treason and a fatal attack inside Vale Taran Palace. Immediate judgment risk. Evidence review underway. Send confirmation receipt. Rowan glanced toward the throne hall doors as guards dragged Adrian toward judgment. You think they'll give us time? Myra's eyes hardened. No, we take it. By the time Adrian was forced to his knees before Queen Orali's Veen, the entire court had already decided what the evidence meant. Nobles shouted for justice. Corrupted counselors whispered about human betrayal. Lord Chancellor Veyr Althos stood near the throne, calm and sorrowful in the way practiced liars often were. Queen Orali's looked down at Adrian, anger and hurt locked behind royal control. You came under treaty protection, she said. Tonight, one of my guards is gone. My son's route was compromised and every record names you. Adrian raised his bruised face. Then your records were prepared before I arrived. The court roared. Myra entered from the rear with Rowan beside her and said, loud enough for the throne to hear, Your Majesty, before you condemn him, allow us to prove whether your traitor wanted you to. Queen Orali's did not grant the review because she trusted the humans. She granted it because every envoy in the throne hall knew what an execution without examination would become by sunrise. Adrian Vale remained on his knees beneath the black steps of the throne, wrists bound, blood drying dark on one sleeve while the nobles whispered for his death in polished voices. Lord Chancellor Veyr Althos stepped forward with practiced sorrow. Your Majesty, delay invites political manipulation. Earth will turn this into insult, then threat, then leverage. Justice must be swift. Captain Myra Voss looked at him once, then back to the Queen. Justice can be swift after it is correct. Rowan Cade stood beside her with a tablet recovered from the human security station, his usual sarcasm held behind a tight jaw. Commander Siren Val stood near Adrian with one hand on his blade, looking like a man being forced to share air with the person who killed his brother. You have 1 hour, Queen Orali said, not to free him, to prove there is enough doubt for a formal tribunal. Myra bowed her head, not deeply, just enough. That is all truth usually needs to begin. The first review happened in the Eastern Service Passage, with royal guards watching every movement as if Myra might smuggle innocence in her sleeve. The dead guard had been removed to a medical slab, but the blood remained on the stone, the blade still lay in place, and the sealed doors hummed under lockdown. Siren's voice was cold. This is where we found him. Myra crouched beside the stain. No, this is where someone wanted you to find him. Siren stepped closer. Careful, Captain. She ignored the warning and examined the blood mark on Adrian's sleeve through a scanner. Transfer pattern, she said, not arterial spray, not strike missed. He put pressure on the wound after the injury. Siren's eyes narrowed despite himself. That proves only that he touched the body. Yes, Myra said. And the wound angle proves more. She turned the medical image toward him. The blade entered low and upward from the victim's left side. Adrian would have needed to be below him and behind him at the same time. He was found in front of him on his knees, pressing the wound shut. Your own corridor camera restart still image confirms that. Siren looked at the image and said nothing. Rowan worked at the door terminal under the watch of 2 armed guards who clearly hated how comfortable he looked near palace systems. Good news, he said. Your security logs are beautifully organized. Siren looked over. And the bad news, Rowan tapped the screen. Real crimes are messy. This is too clean. Adrian's badge entry appears exactly 12 seconds after the corridor isolation command. The door sealed before his badge supposedly activated the restricted zone. A royal technician snapped, "Impossible. Badge access triggers the seal." Rowan gave him a tired look. "That is what the report wants us to believe, yes. Unfortunately, time still insists on moving forward." He enlarged the sequence. Door seal, camera blackout, external feed pause. Then Adrian's badge entry appears retroactively inside the gap. Whoever did this did not just frame him, they edited the room around him. Siren's jaw tightened. Who has authority to insert a badge record? The technician hesitated. High Administration Security, Royal Command, or Emergency Council override. Myra stood slowly. Not Adrian. They checked the weapon next. The ceremonial blade had Adrian's blood on the handle, which sent a pleased murmur through the watching nobles when the finding reached the court feed. Myra requested the full residue scan. Althos objected from the throne hall through the open channel. This is delay disguised as diligence. Myra's voice stayed even. If the evidence is strong, it can survive being examined. The residue result appeared. Rowan leaned in. Well, that's awkward. Siren snapped. Speak plainly. Rowan turned the blade image. There is blood on the handle, but no fresh grip pressure from Adrian. No palm oil transfer matching his skin chemistry. No stress smears. Someone placed his blood on it after the fact, probably from the sleeve while he was restrained or after he touched the guard. Siren looked toward Adrian's holding feed, where the human sat bruised and silent between two guards. The commander's certainty did not break, but it bent. He could still have had help. Myra nodded. Yes, but that means your perfect lone human betrayal theory is dead. Back in the throne hall, the shift was small but visible. Queen Orales listened without speaking. Some nobles grew quieter. Others grew louder, because weak arguments often dress themselves as outrage. Althos stepped closer to the throne. Your Majesty, the humans are not proving innocence. They are manufacturing confusion. Adrian lifted his head from the prisoner's platform. No, Chancellor. Confusion was manufactured before I entered that corridor. Siren returned from the passage with Myra and Rowan, his face carved from reluctant stone. The evidence contains contradictions, he admitted. The court erupted again. A corrupted counselor shouted, "A royal guard lies dead. Will we now let humans lecture us on our own dead?" Myra turned to the queen. "We are not asking you to trust Adrian. We are asking you to ask who needed him guilty this quickly." Rowan raised his tablet. "And I found the next problem. Adrian was not alone before the corridor sealed. A real palace guard crossed his route 39 seconds earlier. Uniform tag partially suppressed, but physical floor pressure remained. Siren went still. Name. Rowan looked at the recovered fragment. Guard Tavern Saul. The commander's expression changed from anger to something colder. Tavern was not assigned there. Myra said softly. Then we should ask why he was there before someone makes sure he cannot answer. Guard Tavern Saul became the most wanted man in Vale Taran for two completely different reasons. To Queen Orales, he was now the missing piece in a murder investigation that had already nearly condemned a treaty officer. To Lord Chancellor Althos and the councillors standing too close to him, Tavern was something far more dangerous. A loose end with a face, a name, and a memory. Commander Siren Val led Myra Voss and Rowan Cade through the lower guard wing with 12 royal soldiers at his back, each one tense because the case had stopped being simple. Adrian Vale remained chained in the judgment hall under heavy guard, but his execution had been paused, and that pause had changed the palace air. Nobles were whispering. Council members were choosing corners. Guards were looking at each other differently. Rowan walked beside Myra with his tablet in hand and muttered, "You can always tell when a palace is nervous. The floors get quieter." Siren did not look amused. "Focus on the evidence," Rowan nodded. "I am. The evidence is currently running away wearing a helmet." Tavern's quarters were locked from the outside, which Siren immediately disliked. "A guard cannot be confined without command authorization," he said. Rowan scanned the frame. "Good news. Someone had command authorization." Siren's eyes narrowed. That is not good news. I know. I used the phrase emotionally, not accurately. Siren forced the door open, and the room beyond told a story no official record wanted heard. A chair was overturned. One wall panel had been cracked by impact. A ceremonial cloak lay half-packed beside a travel satchel. Tavern had tried to leave fast but not cleanly. Myra crouched near the floor and touched 2 drops of dark blue blood near the bed frame. He was injured here. Siren's face hardened. Or punished. Rowan moved to the desk and found a burned command wafer in the ashtray. It was almost destroyed but not fully. He tried to erase something, or someone tried to erase it for him. Myra stood. Can you recover it? Rowan looked offended. Captain, I can recover a shopping list from a crashed cargo drone if it died dramatically enough. This is mostly just embarrassed. While Rowan worked, Siren searched the room with growing anger. Tavern was young, ambitious, too eager for inner-wing assignments. Myra looked at him. That makes him useful to people above him. Siren turned sharply. Do not soften his guilt. If he led Adrian into that corridor, he helped murder one of mine. Myra's voice stayed calm. I am not softening it. I am separating guilt from command. Tavern may have helped set the trap, but someone taught him where to stand. Rowan's tablet chimed. Recovered partial routing. Private summons chain, masked through council security support. Not enough to name the source, but enough to prove Tavern received an off-record order before contacting Adrian. Siren stepped closer. From whom? Rowan shook his head. Fragment ends before the sender seal, conveniently burned. But there is a location ping attached to Tavern's emergency tag after the incident. Lower watch station outside the ceremonial wing. It flickered once, then went silent. Siren's expression darkened. That station was decommissioned years ago. Myra headed for the door. Then someone chose it because no one would look there. Back in the throne hall, time was turning against Adrian. Lord Chancellor Althos stood near Queen Orales with the sad patience of a man pretending not to enjoy pressure. Your Majesty, the humans have now left the hall, taken your guard commander with them, and delayed justice on the word of a missing conspirator. Every moment of hesitation makes the throne appear weak. Adrian, still bound on the prisoner platform, lifted his bruised face. If your throne is weakened by questions, Chancellor, it was already in trouble. A few nobles hissed. Althos smiled faintly. Defiance does not become innocence because it is spoken boldly. Adrian looked at him for a long moment. No, but haste does start sounding like fear if you repeat it enough. The queen's fingers tightened on the arm of her throne, but she did not speak. She had given Myra until dawn. Althos knew that. So did the men already moving quietly through the palace under his private orders. Myra, Rowan, Siren, and 6 loyal guards reached the abandoned lower watch station through an old service bridge. The station sat beyond the ceremonial wing like a forgotten tooth of the palace, all dead lamps, narrow windows, and dust thick enough to hold footprints. Rowan crouched at the entrance. 3 sets in, 2 sets out. 1 dragged. Siren looked down. Tavern, maybe, unless your palace has another bleeding guard with terrible luck. Myra raised one hand and everyone went still. From inside the station came a sound, faint and wet, like someone trying to breathe without permission. They entered with weapons low. Tavern Saul lay behind a collapsed console, armor cut open, one hand pressed weakly to his side. His eyes widened when he saw Siren. Commander, he rasped. Siren crossed the room in 3 strides and seized him by the collar. You led Adrian Vale into that corridor. Tavern's face twisted with pain and fear. I did. I did not know they would kill Rawl. I swear it. They said the human had to be placed there before lockdown. They said the throne must be forced to choose quickly. Myra pulled Siren's hand back. Who said it? Tavern trembled. A council security aide, Chancellor's wing. I never saw the Chancellor. I only carried the seal. Before Siren could answer, Rowan's tablet screamed a proximity warning. Myra turned toward the broken window as black-armored palace soldiers rose from the outer bridge with rifles already aimed. Rowan said softly, well, someone really does not want him talking. The first shot shattered the station wall. Siren threw himself over Tavern, Myra returned fire, and Rowan dragged the medical pod from the corner with both hands, muttering, I miss when evidence stayed in boxes. The frame had become a conspiracy. Tavern was guilty, but he was also proof, and someone inside the palace had just sent soldiers to make sure proof died before dawn. The first volley turned the abandoned watch station into dust, sparks, and broken history. Myra Voss dropped behind a cracked console as rounds chewed through the wall above her head, while Commander Siren Val dragged Tavern Saul behind the only support pillar still pretending to be structural. Rowan Cade had both hands on the emergency medical pod, trying to unfold it with one knee and a level of prayer he would later deny. "I would like to point out," he said over the gunfire, "that evidence is much easier to transport when it is not bleeding, guilty, and unpopular." Tavern coughed, blue blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "I deserve this." Siren looked down at him with fury. "You deserve a trial after you help stop the people you served." Myra fired 3 controlled shots through the broken window, forcing 2 black-armored soldiers back from the service bridge. Their armor carried royal markings, but the markings had been scraped dull, as if loyalty could be removed with a knife. "Those are palace soldiers," she said. Siren's face went colder. "Not mine anymore." The attackers did not rush. That made them more dangerous. They moved like men who knew the station layout, closing angles, cutting off exits, firing at the roof supports instead of wasting shots on panic. One round struck the old communications mast outside, and the station's relay died with a shriek of static. Rowan glanced at his tablet. "They just killed our clean channel to the palace." Myra reloaded without looking at him. "Can you restore it?" "Not unless I seduce a dead antenna, and I'm not emotionally ready for that." He grabbed a cable from the floor and shoved it into Tavern's medical pod. "But I can record everything locally if our witness survives long enough to stay inconvenient." Tavern's eyes flickered open. "They will not let me reach the hall." Siren leaned close, voice like a blade. "Then you had better live out of spite." Myra looked through a shattered wall gap and saw 3 attackers moving toward the rear door. They were not trying to capture Tavern. They were trying to finish him. That changed the weight of every shot. "Siren, rear breach in 10 seconds." Siren passed Tavern's limp body into the half-open medical pod and rose with the controlled rage of a commander realizing the betrayal had worn his own uniform. "Loyal guard, rear line." 2 of his soldiers moved with him, taking positions beside the fallen door. The first attacker came through with a shock blade raised. Siren met him head-on, knocked the blade aside, and slammed him into the wall hard enough to crack the helmet visor. "Who ordered this?" Siren demanded. The soldier spat blood and smiled. "The throne must be forced to choose quickly." Siren froze for half a heartbeat. Myra heard the phrase too, so did Rowan. Tavern made a broken sound from the pod. "Same words," he whispered. Rowan tapped the recorder. "Got that. Very murdery, very incriminating." The station began to collapse after the next blast. A ceiling beam dropped between Myra and the front window, showering the room with stone and hot metal. Outside, the service bridge back to the palace was still intact, but enemy soldiers were taking positions along its far side. Myra saw the problem instantly. If they tried to carry Tavern across in the open, he would die before reaching the midpoint. If they stayed, the station would bury them. She looked at Rowan. Options. Rowan stared at the old power map glowing on his tablet. "There's a maintenance shutter under the bridge, manual track, old emergency storm barrier. It can rise halfway if I feed it power from the station battery." "Halfway? It was built during a cheaper century." "Do it." Rowan crawled toward the wall panel while shots cut sparks from the floor around him. "Just once. I want a plan that doesn't require me to hug a circuit box during an assassination attempt." Siren and Myra covered him while the loyal guard secured Tavern's pod. Rowan ripped open the wall panel, connected 2 live leads with a broken knife, and cursed when the current snapped across his glove. The service bridge groaned outside. A heavy storm shutter began rising from beneath the walkway, not high enough to block everything, but enough to create a moving shield. "Bridge cover is up," Rowan shouted. "Ugly, uneven, and probably offended by physics." Myra moved first. "Go." Siren lifted the front of Tavern's pod with 1 guard at the rear, and they pushed into the open bridge behind the rising barrier. Shots struck the shutter in bright bursts. The whole bridge shook. Tavern gasped inside the pod. Myra walked backward, firing in short bursts. Rowan followed beside the pod, one hand keeping the recorder pressed against Tavron's chest. "Stay awake, Tavron. You're not allowed to become tragic until after testimony." Halfway across, an explosion hit the station behind them. The old structure folded inward, sending a wave of dust and flame across the bridge. The shock knocked Rowan to one knee. Tavron's pod slid toward the edge. Siren caught it with both hands, armor scraping against the floor, muscles locked. Myra grabbed Rowan by the back of his jacket and hauled him upright. "Move," Rowan coughed. "Excellent note, very concise." They reached the palisade access door seconds before the shutter jammed and fell back into its housing. Siren slammed his palm against the access plate. It flashed red. Authority denied. For the first time, true fear moved across his face. "My command seal is locked out." Myra looked back at the attackers advancing through the smoke. "Then the palace is already compromised." Rowan wiped blood from his eyebrow and studied the panel. "Manual override exists, but it needs internal release." Siren raised his rifle toward the door hinges. "Stand back." Myra placed a hand on Tavron's pod. "No. We need him alive and we need the door quiet." Rowan pointed to a narrow service slit below the panel. "Give me 20 seconds and something thin." Siren handed him a ceremonial dagger without hesitation. Rowan blinked. That was almost trust, horrifying. "Open the door." He did. The lock snapped, the door slid wide, and they dragged Tavron into the lower palace access tunnel just as the attackers reached the far side of the bridge. Siren sealed the door behind them with the manual bar, breathing hard, eyes full of a kind of anger that had finally found direction. Tavron's voice came weakly from the pod. "I helped them." Siren looked down at him. "Yes," Tavron swallowed, "but they were never going to stop with the human." Myra glanced toward the upper palace, where Adrian's execution was drawing closer with every minute. "No," she said. "Adrian was the cover." Siren lifted his weapon and began moving, "and the throne is the target." By the time Myra Voss, Rowan Cade, Commander Siren Vol, and the wounded Tavron Saul reached the inner palace access tunnel, the throne hall had already begun preparing Adrian Vale for death. The traitors did not wait because waiting was how frames collapsed. Lord Chancellor Vere Althos stood beside Queen Orales with his hands folded inside his silver sleeves, speaking softly enough to sound loyal and urgently enough to sound afraid for the kingdom. "Your Majesty, the human investigators have left the court with your guard commander. Now palace soldiers report armed conflict near the lower watch station. This is no longer investigation. It is coordinated foreign disruption." Several council members nodded too quickly. Adrian stood bound on the execution platform below the throne, bruised, blood dried on his sleeve, his face pale but steady. Queen Orales looked at him as if trying to find the truth under the evidence and the noise. "Captain Voss was given until dawn," she said. Althos lowered his head. "And every minute until dawn gives Earth time to turn treason into negotiation." Adrian looked up at him. "You are very eager to end a conversation you claim is already settled." A corrupted counselor snapped, "Silence, murderer." Adrian's eyes stayed on Althos. "No, murderers prefer silence." "That is why I am still talking." The nobles erupted. The queen raised one hand and the hall quieted, but not fully. Around the upper tiers, royal guards shifted positions in patterns Adrian had not seen during the ceremony. Too many were unfamiliar. Too many wore the throne crest but avoided the loyal officers near the lower aisle. Adrian noticed because a man facing execution developed sudden respect for details. Prince Kalen stood beside his mother, frightened but trying not to show it. Adrian looked at the boy and spoke more softly. "Your Majesty, I followed a royal seal. I followed your guard. I found a dying man and tried to keep him alive. If I die for trusting your palace, then your throne was breached before I ever entered that corridor." Althos's face did not change, but his fingers tightened once inside his sleeves. "A moving final statement," he said, "but still only a statement." Queen Orales closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them with pain sharpened into duty. "Adrian Vale of Earth, until new evidence is presented, the throne must act on the records before it." The execution blade rose from the platform floor, thin, ceremonial, and merciless. Below the palace, Myra's team hit the first sealed security gate at a run. Siren pressed his command seal to the panel. It flashed red. Authority denied. His face went cold. My seal has been revoked. Rowan leaned over his tablet, breathing hard from the bridge escape. Not revoked. Reassigned. Someone is replacing loyal command paths with council emergency authority. Myra looked at Tavern's medical pod. How long to force it? Rowan stared at the old wall plates. Fast answer, too long. Ugly answer, maybe not. He slid beneath the panel, ripped open a manual access cover, and shoved Siren's ceremonial dagger into the release track. Please do not tell future historians I saved a kingdom with a fancy knife. Siren stood guard with his rifle aimed down the tunnel. Opened the gate. Rowan twisted the blade. Sparks burst across his sleeve. I am attempting a respectful burglary. The gate moved 3 inches, then jammed. Myra stepped in, braced both hands against the opening, and Siren joined her. Together they forced the gate wide enough to drag Tavern's pod through. Behind them, footsteps echoed from the lower tunnel. Traitor soldiers were still coming. In the throne hall, the execution platform locked Adrian's ankles in place. A royal executioner stepped forward, face hidden behind a ceremonial mask. Adrian looked at him and said, "No offense, but I was hoping we would not get this far socially." The executioner did not answer. Althos raised his voice. "Let the throne show the galaxy that Vale Taran does not tremble before human betrayal." Some nobles struck their staffs against the floor in approval. Others looked uneasy now because the speed of justice had begun to feel less like strength and more like hunger. Queen Oralis's hand hovered above the final command crystal. Prince Kalen whispered, "Mother." Althos turned sharply. "Highness, do not let the prisoner's fear infect you." Adrian looked at the boy. "Fear is not infection. Sometimes it is your mind noticing the room is wrong." The queen's eyes snapped back to him, but before she could speak, the throne hall doors shook under a violent impact. The doors did not open at once. They bent. Siren's voice thundered from the other side. "By authority of the royal guard, stand down." A council aide near Althos moved toward a side panel, but Rowan's voice came through the hall speakers first, distorted and breathless. "Hello, terrible people. Evidence delivery, slightly shot at, very inconvenient." The doors finally split apart, and Myra entered with her weapon lowered but ready. Siren came beside her, armor scorched, carrying Tavern's medical pod with 2 loyal guards. Rowan followed, one hand holding a bloodied recorder and the other still clutching his tablet. The hall exploded into shouting. Althos's face remained calm, but the calm had become thin. Myra pointed toward the platform. "Stop the execution," Althos snapped. "This is an armed interruption." Tavern lifted his head weakly from the pod. I led Adrian Vale into the corridor. Silence struck the room harder than any weapon. Siren's voice followed, cold and public. Under orders routed through the Chancellor's administration chain. Myra activated the recorder. Tavern's confession played first. Then the attacker's voice from the watch station repeated the phrase. "The throne must be forced to choose quickly." Rowan pushed the timeline onto the throne display. Door sealed before Adrian's badge entry. Blood transfer after the wound. Weapon planted after lockdown. Tavern's movement trail. Ambush footage from royal soldiers trying to kill him before he testified. None of this proves every name yet, but it proves Adrian Vale was framed. The queen stood slowly, horror widening behind her eyes. "Release him." Althos stepped back. "Your Majesty, this is exactly the human manipulation we warned of." Myra looked at him. "We," that single word landed badly. Althos's mask cracked for half a second. Then the upper doors slammed shut, side panels opened, and several royal guards turned their rifles away from Adrian and toward the queen. Corrupted council members rose from their seats. Althos's voice changed, losing softness at last. "Then the throne has chosen weakness." Adrian's chains were still locked. Myra was inside the killing line. Siren was outnumbered. Rowan stood beside the evidence console, and Prince Kalen was exposed on the dais as the coup finally stopped pretending to be justice. The throne hall became a battlefield before anyone fully accepted that the trial had ended. Corrupted royal guards lifted rifles toward Queen Oralis. while loyal guards hesitated for the terrible half-second that betrayal always steals. Adrian Vale was still chained to the execution platform, wrists locked behind him, ankles fixed in place. The ceremonial blade waiting above his shoulder like the throne itself had not yet learned it had been lied to. Captain Myra Voss moved first. She crossed the killing line and drove her shoulder into Prince Kalen, pushing him behind the throne steps as the first shot burned through the air where the boy's head had been. Commander Siren Val roared, "Loyal guard, shield the crown," and suddenly the hall split in two, not by species, not by rank, but by who still remembered what loyalty meant. Rowan Cade dropped behind the evidence console as a blast tore through the marble edge above him. "Wonderful," he snapped, dragging the recorder cable back into place. Courtroom drama has become indoor treason with furniture damage. A traitor soldier rushed the console, blade raised to smash the broadcast core. Rowan kicked a fallen ceremonial staff under the man's feet, sending him hard into the steps, then slammed the console guard plate down before another shot struck. "Myra," he shouted, "they're trying to kill the evidence feed." Myra fired twice, forcing two soldiers back from the Queen's dais. "Keep it alive." Rowan looked at the sparking console. "That is a bold request for something currently on fire." Adrian pulled against his chains until metal cut into his wrists. Prince Kalen was crouched behind Myra, pale and shaking, while Althos's corrupted counselors shouted over the chaos. "The Queen has lost control. Emergency authority must transfer." Althos stepped backward toward the side passage, no longer pretending sorrow. "Secure the air," he ordered. "The throne must be preserved from foreign contamination." Adrian heard that and went still. The same phrase, the same cold shape behind different words. He looked at the guard nearest his platform, a young loyalist frozen between command and panic. "Release my right hand," Adrian said. The guard stared at him. "You are a prisoner." Adrian's voice hardened. "Then keep me chained and watch them take your prince." The guard made his choice. One restraint snapped open. Adrian did not run. He tore his right hand free, grabbed the execution chain above him, and yanked his body sideways just as a traitor soldier fired at Kalen. The shot struck the blade mechanism, throwing sparks across the platform. Adrian ripped the loosened chain from its track and swung it low, knocking the soldier off balance before Siren drove him down with the flat of his weapon. Siren glanced at Adrian, stunned despite the fight. Adrian breathed hard. "You can apologize later." Siren cut the remaining restraints with one clean strike. "Survive first." Adrian rolled from the platform, weak from blood loss and exhaustion, but moving toward the prince anyway. At the console, Rowan finally forced the palace broadcast wide open. Tavern's confession thundered across the hall, then through every guard channel in the palace. The door timing appeared above the throne. The altered badge log followed. The blood transfer scan. The planted weapon residue. The ambush footage. The corrupted soldiers attacking a royal witness. Rowan's voice cut through the feed, rough and furious. "All loyal units, this is Earth Investigator Rowan Cade." Adrian Vale was framed. The execution was the cover. The coup is happening now. Pick your side before history does it for you. Across the palace, guard channels lit with startled voices. Orders began changing. Units that had been frozen by confusion started moving toward the throne hall. Althos realized it before anyone else. His plan had depended on speed, silence, and Adrian dying before the evidence became a living thing. Now the evidence was everywhere. He ran for the Crown Authority passage with 2 council guards beside him. Myra saw him leave, but 3 traitor soldiers blocked her path. "Adrian," she shouted. Adrian turned from the prince. He saw Althos at the side arch, and something in his expression went cold enough to make even Kalen stop trembling. He moved after him with Siren at his side, not fast, not clean, but with the stubborn pace of a man who had already survived the place where he was meant to disappear. They caught Althos at the entrance to the Crown Authority chamber. The Chancellor pressed his seal to the door, but the system hesitated under Rowan's broadcast lockdown. Adrian stepped into the corridor behind him. "Leaving early, Chancellor." Althos turned, and for the first time the courtly mask was gone. "You were supposed to die in that corridor." Siren's eyes sharpened. The open guard channel carried every word. Adrian stepped closer. Before Tavern talked, before the logs were checked, before the queen realized her own counsel had put a knife in her hand and called it justice, Althos's face twisted. You were nothing, a foreign officer, a convenient body. Adrian's voice was quiet. Then you should have made sure the body stopped breathing. Siren disarmed the council guards before they could move. Myra arrived seconds later with loyal soldiers flooding the passage behind her. Rowan's voice came through the speakers, almost breathless. For the record, that confession came through beautifully. Terrible for him, great for truth. Queen Orali stood in the throne hall as loyal guards forced the corrupted counselors to their knees. Her face was pale with horror, but her voice did not break. Lord Chancellor Veyr Althos, by authority of the crown, you are stripped of office and bound for treason against Vale Taran. Althos looked toward Adrian, not the queen. That was when everyone understood the title of the night. He had never feared Earth. He had feared the man who survived the frame. Later, Adrian stood before the throne without chains. He was bruised, exhausted, and barely upright, but Prince Kalen stood alive beside his mother. Queen Orali's descended the steps and lowered her head before him, not as surrender, but as public truth. I nearly let perfect evidence make me murder an innocent man. Adrian looked at the damaged hall, the wounded guards, Myra standing silent, Rowan leaning against the ruined console, and Siren watching with hard-earned shame. Perfect evidence, Adrian said softly, is what traitors build when they fear questions. The throne had thought the human betrayed them because every record, every seal, and every witness had been arranged to say he did. But the traitor feared Adrian Vale's name, because Adrian was never meant to survive long enough for the truth to gather around him.